All right, welcome to this explainer. You know, a single global restaurant chain can easily source ingredients from over 100 different countries. It's this massive, tangled logistical web, and honestly, it carries an immense amount of hidden risk. So today, we're zeroing in on an absolutely crucial area of corporate sustainability, supply chain management. Specifically, we're going to demystify exactly how restaurants can quantify and report their sustainable food sourcing using the SASB framework. If you've ever felt like sustainability reporting is just kind of vague or overly broad, well, you're in the right place. We're going to break it down step by step using the official source materials so you can really get a grip on the mechanics behind the metrics.
So let me ask you, how sustainable is your restaurant's menu really? I mean, genuinely. Because as you probably know, just claiming a menu as green or ethical doesn't really cut it anymore. Regulators, investors, consumers, they all want hard data. Do you truly know the origins of the food hitting your prep tables? The SASB standard basically treats supply chain compliance as a protective shield for your brand. It's not just a nice to have, it's a core driver of long-term value. Okay, here's our roadmap for this explainer. First, the supply chain challenge. Second, defining sourcing standards. Third, measuring the percentage. Fourth, third-party certifications. And finally, managing sourcing risks. Let's kick things off with Section 1, the supply chain challenge, risks hidden in the ingredients. Because the restaurant industry is so incredibly global, it brings with it some really intense risks. I mean, sourcing ingredients to maintain consistent quality across hundreds of locations, that's a massive operational headache. And as our source material points out, these risks are both environmental and social. We're talking about climate change throwing off crop yields, which doesn't just harm the planet, right? It literally spikes the cost of your produce and meat. Then you've got labor rights and immigration reforms directly affecting food prices. Even commercial catch limits dictate your seafood supply. And of course, any sort of human rights or animal welfare incident can cause immediate, sometimes irreversible reputational damage.
And this quote right here brilliantly illustrates the whole philosophy behind the SASB's standard. Restaurants are not just passive buyers. Their sheer scale and demand actually dictate how global agriculture operates. So because of this massive footprint, sustainable sourcing isn't just about doing what's good for society, it's absolutely vital to ensure the business actually has a future food supply. Which brings us perfectly to this specific requirement. It officially lives under SASB metric FB-RN-43A.1, Supply Chain Management and Food Sourcing. This is the exact line item that demands quantitative disclosure. It's the metric that takes those kind of vague sustainability promises and transforms them into hard, auditable numbers. Moving right along to Section 2, defining sourcing standards, the framework for better food. So, what counts as an acceptable standard? Well, SASB explicitly requires you to account for food that meets both environmental and social sourcing standards. It's a two-pronged approach. Environmental standards are all about the planet, protecting natural resources, boosting efficiency. Social standards, on the other hand, focus on people and animals. Think treatment of workers, community impact, animal welfare, and food safety. To track this metric properly, your food purchases have to hit standards that address these specific impacts. Now, the good news is SASB actually gives you some flexibility here. These standards could be your own internally developed guidelines, or they can be aligned with major industry initiatives. The standard gives some great examples, like the Global Roundtable for Sustainable Beef, or the SIFAV Initiative for Fruits and Veggies, and the SAI platform. Basically, if your sourcing aligns with established frameworks like these, you are setting up the perfect numerator for our equation.
And speaking of equations, let's hit Section 3, measuring the percentage, the how-to calculation. Okay, this is where the rubber meets the road. How do we actually measure the percentage of food purchased that meets these environmental and social sourcing standards? It's honestly a lot like a simple recipe. Step 1, identify the cost of the food you bought during the reporting period that successfully meets those standards we just talked about. That's your numerator. Step 2, figure out the total overall cost of all food purchased by the entity. That's your denominator. Step 3, just divide that standards-compliant cost by the total cost.
But wait, I really need to pause and emphasize a crucial rule here. The final percentage for this metric is determined strictly by the financial cost of the food, not by weight, not by volume, not by the number of items sitting in your walk-in fridge. Because remember, SASB is fundamentally an accounting standard built for investors, right? So the financial spend is the truest representation of a company's commitment and risk exposure. Always calculate this metric by cost.
All right, Section 4, third-party certifications, the gold standard of verification. Internal guidelines are a great start for sure.
But SASB wants organizations to push transparency even further. You are actually required to separate out and disclose the percentage of food purchased that is certified to a third-party environmental or social standard. The math is exactly the same, the cost of your third-party certified food divided by your total food cost, but it gives everyone a super clear view of how much of your supply chain has been independently verified by outside experts.
So if you're sitting there wondering, well, what exactly qualifies as a legitimate third-party certification? The standard actually lists some globally recognized heavy hitters. This includes ingredients certified to standards like Fairtrade International or Fairtrade USA for ethical labor, or the Marine Stewardship Council, the MSC, for sustainable seafood. You've also got Rainforest Alliance, plus specific roundtables for high-risk stuff like soy and palm oil. Tracking your spend through these specific certifications is exactly what investors want to see.
Let's wrap things up with Section 5, Managing Sourcing Risks, Strategies for Resilience.
So, once you have your numbers, how do you actually manage and improve them? SASB asks entities to discuss their strategic approach here. The standard highlights a few active management strategies. Things like screening new suppliers, diversifying who you buy from so you're not totally sunk if one region gets hit by a drought, offering training to farmers, engaging on human rights, and aggressively using those supply chain audits and certifications we were just looking at.
At the end of the day, tracking this data isn't just some administrative chore. The standard makes it very clear. By increasing your sourcing in line with these environmental and social standards, you are actively maintaining consistent food quality. You're getting ahead of food safety issues. You're boosting your corporate reputation. And honestly, you're positioning the brand to capture more market share from consumers who actually care about this stuff. By mastering these SAS data requirements, specifically how to calculate your sourcing percentages by cost and validating them through third-party certifications, you are literally transforming the unknown into the measurable. So I'll leave you with this final thought. When you look deep into your own ingredient sourcing, is your supply chain a hidden liability? Or is it verified, measured, and ready to be your greatest strategic asset? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer today.